What's up, guys? We are back. Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where a Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. Now, it is me, Faisal, representing the UK and having my best married life in the UK, a big football fan. And we have opposite me, talking this through and discussing this with me, Andrew, representing the Stars and Stripes. How are you today, Andrew?
I'm absolutely wonderful, but the real question is, how are you now that you're a married man?
Yeah, I feel good. It feels like I have transferred to the best team in the country. Obviously, Manchester United. Let's just say, I feel good. I feel refreshed, ready. It's the end of a season, brand new season for me as well. Loads of football terminologies, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to move on to my next chapter of my life. So yeah, thanks, man. Here to get stuck in with this.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here with you and finally happy that you have joined the married side.
Yeah.
So then let us stop talking about our wonderful marriages, which we absolutely love, and talk about the other thing we love, football, which I also call soccer.
Yeah, the beautiful game.
It is quite indeed in beautifulness, just like our wives. But now let us talk specifically what happened this season, because it's done. It's over. A lot of stuff has happened, and it felt like the longest season ever. Oh my gosh, just like doing some look backs to get ready for this episode. Crazy how much has happened. So would you want to run us through what
Yeah.
the top fives look like?
Yeah, of course. We can break down, obviously, what we kind of do here at Nutmegged. We try and give you the most up-to-date current news regarding the top 5 leagues in Europe specifically. So obviously that means Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, which is the Italian league, and of course Ligue 1, which is what we call PSG League or French League as is,
Yeah.
right? So let's start with the obvious ones, which aren't great, which were kind of like straightforward stuff. Ligue 1, PSG walked it pretty comfortable. I'm sure we'll break down at some point what's happening at PSG over with Mbappe, what's happening with their manager, new manager on the horizon, and obviously players, ins and outs and stuff. We'll do a big transfer one at some point, but PSG pretty comfortable and pretty straightforward season for them. Then we'll go into Serie A, which was an interesting one. Not your usual. There was no your Inter Milans or your AC Milans or Juventus, which perhaps been pretty dominant, but Juventus did dominate the newspapers with their kind of their back and forth in terms of their appeal and their kind of losing and dropping their points, etc. But the Atlanta team, Serie A team, Italian team, did end up winning, which was fantastic news for a lot of people who are huge fans of the club and huge fans of football, specifically in Italy as well, looking to sort of see teams other than places like Juventus, which have dominated Italian football for so long, and having that. So fantastic stuff from Italian league and from Atlanta in particular.
I love Atalanta, which they're really cool, but don't you love Napoli even better since they finished first in Serie A?
Did they actually?
Wow! What a world are you watching? Dude, Napoli has been like talking about winning the Scudetto for like a couple months now because they've been just kicking butt. And you're over here like Atalanta, bro. Atlanta, I think they didn't even finish in the top 4. I think they're like,
they're fifth. Someone kick me off this podcast right now. Like, I'm getting ahead of myself. I am literally getting ahead of myself. I'm seeing the strip in my mind. I'm seeing the blue strip in my mind. I'm saying Atlanta. Like, I'm literally, it's crazy. That is.
We were prepping for this episode. If you were saying Atlanta, I'm like, oh man, did I like lose something here? Like, did this really happen? Serie A? Did Napoli just fall off the face of the earth? I love it. That's awesome.
Obviously, I meant Napoli. Thanks for correcting me there. Because imagine that you're confident throughout the whole episode, being like, yeah,
that's right.
And imagine our listeners switching off, being like, these guys know absolutely nothing about football. They have not.
Why am I listening to this soccer podcast about these guys that don't even know what they're talking about?
So in my mind, I was thinking Napoli, saying Atlanta, but yes, Napoli, of course, huge. Maradona, how can you forget? It is huge Italian club. So yeah, congratulations to Napoli. Apologies to any Italian football fans listening. The La Liga, we would say normal business resumed. Barcelona and Xavi are number one again, which has been good. They've had a tough few seasons, but now they are top of the league, and I'm sure a lot of fans are very happy for it. What did you think of Barcelona's? And that is correct, right?
That is
Barcelona
correct.
definitely did win.
Correct. Yes.
What do you think
Barcelona,
of
10 points.
their
10
season?
points above Real Madrid. I think it was good. It was good. So they ended up 10 points above the second place team, which was Real Madrid. And I mean, ultimately, that's the goal for Barcelona, always trying to beat out their biggest rivals and then winning La Liga at the same time. I followed them a little bit closer than normal, and they're like one of the big clubs here in the United States that tons of people follow just because they have that big brand recognition. So if you're just a typical fan of football or soccer here in the US, you'll just know like the big Champions League teams essentially. So like that's who most people will know, like if they're just a casual soccer fan. So you see a lot of that around. So I don't necessarily follow them hardcore like some of those other people do that are just like, hey, I need a team to support. One of the biggest teams, Barcelona, they're usually pretty cool. But I did follow them a little bit more this season because Robert Lewandowski, so he is the Polish national team striker and one of my favorite players. My last name is Polish. I've been to Poland, visited where my ancestors were. So I loved watching him still being able to continue, maybe not as amazing form as he was when he was playing in the Bundesliga, but still scoring a lot of goals and looking pretty sharp in that kit. And I think that Barcelona kit is the next kit that I need to get. I still think everything is crazy because their financial situation is still in flux. We don't have a resolution on that. They're still trying to bring in more big name players. So I'm still confused about that. So I feel like that makes this season have like a little asterisk for me. Certainly still awesome. They still perform well. They beat out Real Madrid, which I always like to see because I do like Barcelona a bit more than Real Madrid. So that's happy. Overall, solid season. They had a lot of good performances. I think they finally found the right players to fit in their system. So I don't think they really need to be spending a ton of money trying to bring on other big name players, but it is what it is. Overall, good season for Barcelona. 10 points above Real Madrid. I don't think they can ask for any more.
Absolutely bang on. I think it's such a big one for Xavi in particular as well, bringing to where they were the previous season. They didn't do particularly well in the Europa League. We know how their Europa League ended, with obviously Manchester United beating them, which is fantastic for us Man United fans, but also for us in terms of looking to hunt down that Europe, that elusive, more kind of European football that we really kind of wanted, and getting those goals and getting those cups that we really wanted, especially in Europe in particular. So yeah, it's fantastic to kind of see. Speaking of like how it was such a big dominating, sort of Barcelona dominated with 10 points. Do you want to talk us through how was it as dominant in the Bundesliga by any chance, or was it a tight one? What were we thinking?
It was much tighter, which there are a lot of Bundesliga fans in the United States. I think it's because that league in general has started marketing more toward like the North American market. That's been kind of cool to see, and they've made it more accessible and kind of more fun in terms of broadcasting elements that they've included. So I do always appreciate that being a soccer fan over here in the US because we don't always get the best media coverage when it comes to other leagues, maybe other than the Premier League. So Bundesliga, I do appreciate you. It was absolutely insane to watch this year if you follow the Bundesliga because there was a lot of drama throughout the season with a lot of clubs vying for some of those top spots. And in the end, it comes down to usually the top two that we expect to be there. Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich dueling it out in the final day, decision day over in the Bundesliga, trying to see who will win. And personally, I'm much more happy to see Dortmund winning. I think that's just because we always see Bayern ending up at the top of the table. So those two duking out for the final position. And unfortunately, from my perspective, Bayern Munich end up claiming the top portion, that number one spot of that league. Is that what you expected? How are you feeling about the Bundesliga season?
It's really difficult because very similar to yourself, I am a big Dortmund fan in the Bundesliga as well. I think for me, the Bundesliga is an interesting one because I feel like it is almost feels like Bayern Munich, and you look at the teams, they just literally buy the teams below them. They just buy out good players from the other teams. It's not, I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's really great to kind of see that. So for me, it was good to see Dortmund battling it out there and being in that position and be able to kind of perform and try to kind of almost get there nearly. We know they have key players, and for me, Jude Bellingham, which will break down going to Real Madrid obviously at some point as well, which is fantastic to kind of see from a British player's perspective and England player perspective. But him not playing and injuring himself probably was maybe the ending that he did not want to have. I mean, it would have been amazing to see him lift the trophy for Dortmund, but unfortunately he was injured that game. And again, just didn't work. You'd argue that perhaps Dortmund did overachieve in that league in terms of where they were, but you have different managers. You have a change in manager mid-season. You have obviously Thomas Tuchel coming in, which I'm still trying to get my head around how that came about, just because it felt very abrupt for them to change managers at the time they did. They were pretty much dominating the league to kind of do where they are now. So I'm sure that'll be an interesting one for us to kind of break down at some point. But yeah, overall gutted for Dortmund. Next season, I just feel like Bayern Munich are just going to be back to business and comfortably trying to take the league completely next season. But yeah, bad luck for Dortmund. We'll see next season.
I think so too. I think they will be back to their winning ways. This was an off season by their standards. I'm nervous for them a little bit because I think that the board that controls the decisions was the reason that they made that managerial change, because Nagelsmann was trying to take some different directions that they didn't like. So I don't know if all is easy, happy sailing quite yet for them. And I'm hoping that uncomfortability, if that's even a word, brings them down a little bit again for next season so that we have some more excitement like this.
Speaking of excitement, the Premier League. Wow. Where do we begin? I mean, you could say from the top to the bottom, there was drama. There was last day of the season clinching. There was, certain teams that probably should have won the league and perhaps sort of falling in the last few games. So let's break this down. Let me take down the unfortunate relegation of three teams, which was we had obviously Leeds go down, we had Southampton go down, and Leicester go down. Breaking those teams down, if you look at it from Southampton perspective, a very very poor season. I think they were relegated with 2 games to go still mathematically, and I mean it's not, if you look at it from the large scale of other seasons, perhaps it's perhaps different in other seasons, but I mean it's not as bad in other seasons for other clubs in terms of relegation, but still really poor. You've got clear players like Ward Prowse, for example, which and Roman Lavia, for example. These are insane players which will probably go elsewhere off the back of this. Really poor. I love Southampton as a club. I think they do well. They just had a lot of change of managers, which wasn't great, and now unfortunately they've kind of paid the price for that. Then you obviously have Leeds. Leeds for me is not necessarily a shocker, but if you look at it from the past few seasons, you look at Bielsa and what he brought to the club. And if anyone's watched it, I'm sure we talked about this podcast, and me and Andrew are fans of All or Nothing and on Amazon. If you haven't seen it, watch that documentary. It's excellent. And it breaks you down how Bielsa is like and what he was doing. And when he left, you can just sort of see almost the soul of that Leeds team kind of gets ripped out. Lots of missed opportunities, no lack of energy. And fortunately for them, that was what cost them as well. Lack of energy. The stamina in their team wasn't great. Certain players not performing. And I think there was a crucial penalty miss near the final end of the season, which really kind of basically sold their season out really for them. So unfortunately, Leeds are down. And then obviously we have Leicester City, which I'm probably most gutted about. As we all know, they're title winners until their team really kind of got torn apart. You got your Mahrez, your Kante, you've got quite key players within that. A lot of people, clubs, Schmeichel left. There's just a lot, and I think that is fairly inevitable. It's still a sad way to see them go. I really like them as a team. James Maddison's going to go on to amazing things. Harvey Barnes is going to go on to amazing things. These players are incredible and were very good in the Premier League. It's unfortunate they were in a team that wasn't performing at all. Iheanacho, for example, as well. These players should not be in the Championship. So I'm hoping they'll be coming up to the Premier League and seeing other teams. So yeah, fingers crossed for them to come back up. So yeah, that is the bottom three. But Andrew, what we're saying in the top four situation, and even the Europa League top six, shall we say?
Yeah, I will take us through this top six. I will mention a sad day for Leeds because they had 3 Americans from our national team on their squad.
Did, yeah.
And Jesse Marsh as well, a U.S. manager, not ending up as a manager there. So they've had a lot of tumultuous times this season, which is disappointing. The crazy part to me, Leicester City, their squad is eerily similar to that of last season. So it's shocking to me that they just underperformed so much because you were just mentioning some of the big names that they have. They really have some good players and just could not pull it out. So that was sad to see. But let us go toward the top of the table now. We'll start in your Europa League positions because I know there's this new league that I still don't even fully know the like
The
in
Conference
seventh
League,
place
yeah, the
conference league.
Europa Conference Cup, yeah,
They're just adding more stuff just to make
of
other
course.
teams feel good. That's fine. It was it is. If you're a fan of that, seventh place, it was Ashton Villa. So there is that for you finishing seventh. Then we move up to sixth, which is really cool. Brighton. Brighton had an awesome season. They were super fun to watch. And if I had to pick a team and give them an award for the most exciting team to watch this season, I would probably have to go with Brighton. Brentford was always also close up there, but Brighton was just so cool. The way that they played, they had dynamic elements to their gameplay as well. They were great on the counter, and they had some underperforming players in previous seasons step up this season and either get sold or still are on the team and have maybe made some of the teams of the seasons from people making those different rosters. So you see Brighton in sixth, Liverpool in fifth. Not a lot of predictions ended up seeing Liverpool slide down so far after being one of the top teams being able to compete with Manchester City. We've talked about this in a previous episode as well. I think that Liverpool are currently the only team that really can compete with Manchester City in terms of the new structure that they're creating with so much money being pumped into clubs like Manchester City as an example, and then being able to bridge that gap of competitiveness. I think Liverpool, again, is the only team that can really do that. But that didn't look so close this season, seeing them finish in fifth. They started off decently and then had quite a big slump and then tried to make a run toward the end of the season that got them into that fifth place spot. We move up to our top four. So Newcastle, some of the new runners up here in the Champions League spots. You love to see it. However, that is one of the teams that have been bought out by a state, if you could say that or so, pumping in money now. So you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. But that is the new world order in terms of football clubs being managed and owned by some of those large corporations, even countries. So it has been an interesting season, though, overall for Newcastle because they get that takeover. They have new managers come in, new staff as well, and then bring in new players, but they're not doing like the flashy thing that you see Manchester City do, just buying some of the top names out there. They're much more strategic in how they purchase players and implement them into their squad. It's been fun to see, like someone like Almiron, not a household name by any means, a solid role player up into this season, and then having the form of his life in the middle of the season helped out my fantasy team greatly. So much appreciated to that. So you like seeing some of those maybe not household big name players performing really well and helping a new team get into the Champions League spots. Then you'll have in third, the boys, Manchester United. We were hoping for a little bit of a bigger push toward that top of the table, but we'll happily take a Champions League spot after some of the tumultuous seasons that we've had, looking back onto that. Then the top two, dueling it out toward close-ish to the end of the season. Number two, Arsenal, and then number one, unfortunately, and usually unsurprising now, Manchester City. Looking back at the top four and the top six, what are your thoughts on the season overall? Is it what you kind of expected?
Yes, I think for me it was very much a case of Arsenal really ruining their chances with that kind of final few three games at the end of the season where they begin to draw. And the nail in the coffin was obviously that Forest loss, which really kind of rubbed salt in the wound. For me, Brighton, great performers, great, like you said, to kind of make it into that space. Villa, again, two top teams, Villa and Brighton, really making those 5 and 6. Seeing Chelsea really underperform, was an interesting one as well. And then obviously, from my personal perspective, obviously Man United getting to where they were with how we started. Let's not forget we began the season with Brighton loss. Then there was that Brentford 4-0. Then there was the City 6-0. That Foden hat trick and Haaland hat tricks. 7-0 Liverpool, and yet we're still third. I mean, there's a lot to learn from the season, but I'm happy with where we are at the moment, as in currently in the state of play. And obviously, it's City. I mean, enough said about City, right? As a team, by far the best team, unfortunately, in the country at the moment, firing all cylinders, if not some of the best players in the Premier League at the moment. So yeah, I mean, you'd argue you're expecting nothing less for them to win the league. So yeah, amazing stuff.
I would agree. I think that overall it kind of shook out into what we thought it would, maybe. Other than maybe Arsenal overperforming. For me, I don't think that I thought that Arsenal would be that close to Manchester City and leading for the majority of the season. And the crazy stat that's out there, I know people talk about it all the time, of where Arsenal was leading for X amount of days. And that was like the record of saying, hey, if you've got to this amount of days, then you will ultimately end up winning the Premier League. So they broke the record for that, for being in the top position and then not actually finishing in the top position at the end of the season. So a little bit of a heartbreak for Arsenal. And I would have loved to see it because I hate Manchester City in general. It's just disappointing they couldn't hold it through.
It's an interesting one because obviously, as Man United fans, we don't want to see these sorts of clubs around us do well. But we have to appreciate how good City have been. There's no two ways about it. I've got a lot of Arsenal friends who are supporters of friends who are supporters of Arsenal, and I honestly don't think I would ever have heard the last of it if Arsenal had actually ended up winning. So I'm also, it's a mixed bag. It's kind of up and down, but I'm hoping next season that we'll see a harder race for the top four, 100%. If you look at the clubs in general, you've got your City confidently up there. Liverpool aren't going to be resting on this, so they'll be coming back for sure. They haven't got Europa League. Oh, they've got Europa League. They haven't got Champions League, so that'd be an interesting one. They're probably now in the same position we were last season, so that'd be an interesting one to kind of see. Your Chelsea, they're going to come back. There's no denying it. Toboli's not going to literally let them languish in mid-table again this season. There's no two ways about it. So you've got those three clubs into that space as well. Spurs going to be back in that space. Now you chuck in Newcastle in that space as well. It's going to be a really tight top race for top four next season. So yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, congratulations again to City. It's been a crazy season for them. Almost nearly there. Kind of a couple of games trying to kind of get ground out those 1-0s, those 2-0s, and then ending the season. Getting the league down to thanks to Nottingham Forest being Arsenal, which is actually hilarious if you look on it on that scale of things. But yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, I'm here for that. Absolutely. Anytime that some lower, smaller teams in the league can beat some of the big boys, especially to like make it on an important day, I'm here for that. It's always humorous, especially when it's not against Manchester United. Here for that. You mentioned a few of those teams like Spurs and Chelsea not showing up this season. So Chelsea finishing 12th. That's pretty wild.
Wow.
And then Tottenham in 8th. So that is not ideal for those two teams. We will be doing an episode coming up probably next to this episode about our predictions. So it's going to be like a way too early prediction episode where we talk about where everyone in this league is going to end up. So that will be a fun one. So stay tuned for that one. Spoiler alert. I know that FaZe has already kind of talked about some of the places that he thinks. I think Tottenham are going to suck even worse than they sucked this season. And I think Chelsea are going to be competing for the top 4. So we'll have a fun discussion about that. So make sure you listen to the next episode. We also, in terms of predictions, did make some predictions with, it was your fiance at the time, my wife, but now your wife. So we had the 4 of us having some conversations about where we think the season would finish. It was maybe about a third of the way into the season. So it wasn't like a full off prediction at the beginning of the season, but we're going to run through some of those very quickly. So let's look back at what some of those predictions were. Let's start at the bottom. So we did make our predictions for the bottom 3, and I will start us off with yours. Do you remember what you selected for yours?
Yeah, of course. So I think I was fairly confident on Nottingham Forest kind of going down. I think I'd put that. I think when we did this, they weren't having the greatest run of games, so I assumed that they would be there. I think I'm pretty sure I kind of said Everton as well, which we know what happened there. And I think in the episode, if you listen back to the episode, I'm in between 2 clubs. I'm in between maybe maybe a few kind of teams. I kind of want Leicester to stay, a few other kind of things. I think I either say Leicester or Southampton. Do I say?
You say Leicester. Yep.
Leicester. Okay. I go for Leicester. I think I was in between Southampton and Leicester, and I say Leicester. So
you do.
3.
Yep. So those are three. I mean, pretty solid shout overall.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, the Leicester City call absolutely making that the right one,
yeah,
and then Everton just sneaking out of the relegation zone, actually finishing in
yeah.
17th. So good call from you.
1 out of 3 is not too
Now,
bad.
yeah, we're happy with that,
I will
and
take
we'll
that. Yeah,
see what our record looks like in the next episode when we make a prediction at the beginning of the
yeah.
season. That'll be fun. All right, now we'll move on to mine, which was the actually exact same as yours. So I also said that Everton would be relegated in the 18th spot, Leicester City in the 19th spot, and Nottingham Forest in the 20th spot. So shout out to Forest stepping it up and finishing 16th. So a little bit ways out of the relegation zone by 4 points in total. With that, I loved Leeds. I think they're a fun club to watch, especially because I have the American bias. I was really hoping that they would get out of the relegation zone. I also, in one of our other episodes, talked about the route that they would get out. I think that there was the perfect way for them to do it, but their club was just in shambles in terms of the management wasn't in place and they weren't sure about their identity. So, unfortunately, not able to make it out. Moving on to my wife, Rachel's predictions. She also said Everton. And this is impressive because Rachel and Fee, they don't necessarily watch soccer and follow it like we do.
Mm.
So the predictions that they made are pretty cool to see. So she says Everton, again, Everton finishing 17th, so they do squeak out. She has Chelsea in there.
My favorite of all the predictions, if I'm honest with you.
I
Would
agree.
have been such a great episode to come back and then I actually would have generally had her on this episode just to tell her that that happened. Would have been amazing.
Yes. That would, and man, if they really would have fallen that far, that would have been just an immaculate day for everyone in the world of football, except Chelsea fans, of course.
Of course.
And then her final one, she also picked Forest, which was a pretty solid shout. So not really following the Premier League like we do to have Everton and Nottingham Forest plugged into there. Good for
Solid.
her. It's a
Solid.
good shout. And now over to your lovely wife. Fee, her predictions were Wolves. I know that was a tough one for you to swallow.
I think she said that when if you listen back to the episode, I apologize to my family on that episode because yeah, that should not have been said because we do not want Wolves to go down, obviously. But yeah, quite jokes.
Yes, love that. So FaZe is from that area, so that's why that one hurts for him. So she had Wolves, Nottingham Forest, and Southampton. So a lot of Nottingham Forest, we all actually, the four of us predicted that Forest would end up falling. So apologies to all of the Forest players out there, the fans too. Sorry for not having faith because you showed us and we are certainly here for that. Southampton, she called that one absolutely right. So she even had them finishing at the very bottom of the league, and they did so with 25 points. And Leeds was above them with 31, so they were in last place by quite a stretch. So a good shout from pretty much all of us predicting overall what the bottom of the table really looks like, but a good shout with Southampton having that in the 0 spot.
Okay, Angie. So we've done the bottom three. Unfortunately, the relegation battle. A couple of points there from everybody. Some good sort of points. And obviously, Fee got it bang on for Southampton there. So congrats. Now let's get on to the top four. What was everyone's and sort of like predictions of that one?
Yes, let's run through these predictions. Again, this was made about a third way into the season. Faisal, we're starting with you. You selected Arsenal at the top. Then you went Man City 2, Man United 3, Newcastle 4. So a pretty strong showing for you. The only portion that was missed is just swapping Arsenal and Man City. I'll jump to me because I had the exact same thing in terms of predictions that you did. So we were at a point in the season where we knew that these were really the top four candidates. We were seeing Liverpool starting to make a challenge as well for the top four. Tottenham, we're struggling a bit. And I think I even said that in our episode too, like Tottenham is just going to suck and they're not going to end up making any type of a comeback, which they did not. So my top four as well. Number 1, Arsenal, 2, Man City, 3, Man United, and 4, Newcastle. I think that was a bit hopeful from us because we wanted to see Arsenal win. And I was really hoping that that would be the case. But we all know how the season turned out. The City just continued into fourth gear and stamped any last hopes that Arsenal had of actually winning the Premier League. But now on to the exciting predictions from our wives. My wife, Rachel, she had Arsenal finishing top as well, which is impressive because she had no idea what the table even looked like. So good shout from her on that one. She had Man United finishing in second place. So love to see that from her. Then West Ham Interesting shout, pulling that in third, and then Liverpool in fourth. So not the worst top four, and I wish it looked more like this with Man United finishing in second and Man City nowhere to be seen. Now we move over to your wife, Fee. Quite a solid prediction she makes with Man City top, Arsenal in second, Man United in third, and Newcastle in fourth. You may see that as somewhat familiar because that's how it actually worked out.
Great. Wow. That is 4 out of 4. For a person that perhaps says that she doesn't watch football, I think maybe some sort of like, maybe she's checking scores out, maybe she's like checking out the league. I mean, I'm not sure. I think I might have to, when we do this next time, I might have to have a quick conversation with her and get her predictions, use them for my own, because that is bang on. Like, yeah. And that's probably where we think, perhaps we overthought it, right? And that's probably we need to look at that as well, which is fantastic. So congratulations.
Now that we have looked at the predictions that we made about a third of the way through the season, let's look at our Premier League team of the season, the players that we think were the best in the Premier League at each position. So, Faze, I'm going to toss it to you first. Let's talk goalkeepers. Who you got?
Yeah, this is a tough one because there's been a lot of great keepers in this. There was obviously keepers that I felt like 100%. If you look at top four, for example, could have made it. You're looking at maybe not necessarily David De Gea. Maybe there was players. Obviously, Edison could be an option from the title winning team of the Man City champions as well. And obviously, there's the likes of Nick Pope could have been in there as well. But for me, I'm gonna go with David Raya on this one now. It's an interesting one because for me, Brentford have definitely overperformed. But I think where they stand and where their security was in their keeper. And you see that from a lot of the moment with transfers and the fact that the goalkeeper currently at the moment is in a lot of top tier conversation with lots of clubs. Spurs are coming in for him at the moment as well. If you look at across the season, there's penalty saves in from David Raya. There is he has been a key person, a key player that's allowed them to get to where they are today in the Premier League and where they finished the Premier League. So for me, Dave Raya has to be up there, and is my choice of keeper for this one. What is your thoughts? What are you choosing?
Yeah, Raya is awesome. I had him on my fantasy team for the majority of the season. So I was also torn between him and Allison of Liverpool. I think that I would probably lean on giving it to Raya just because his stats are also just ridiculous. So the Brentford team ended up earning their highest top flight finish since 1938. And I would venture to say that one of the biggest reasons is because of Raya just playing out of his mind. And now I'm thinking maybe he has a shout at the Spanish national team goalkeeper slot. They have a lot of talented keepers coming out of Spain, and David De Gea was one of those Spanish goalkeepers. I think maybe seeing the twilight years of his career now, at least with Manchester United for sure. So we'll see if he's still in a conversation for a goalkeeper spot there, and the situation with Manchester United. We can have a conversation on that later. But David Raya made the most saves in the top flight and had the best save percentage of any goalkeeper to play at least 5 times across the campaign. So that's just ridiculous number, especially from like not a household name of a goalkeeper in the Premier League. So that is just ridiculous stats. The reason that I had Allison as well is because he had the most clean sheets other than David De Gea, which David De Gea had just such an up and down season. He had some howlers, some mistakes. So that was kind of confusing overall. But Allison, I think, was really consistent and really helped Liverpool end up making that final push to the end of the season to get them into that 5th spot. So that's why it's between those two for me. I would end up giving it to Raya, though, just because coming out of nowhere, having the season that he did was just awesome.
Makes sense. It's all beginning well. We're all agreeing on the right players at the moment. Let's see how this pans out throughout
Oh,
the next one.
yes.
Actually,
All right, then let's talk about defenders. Do you want to go
yeah.
with the backs first, or do you want to do maybe some center backs in the middle?
I'll just hit you with my top four for some of the back
Beautiful.
four that I've kind of chosen. So we'll start with the centre backs. For me, Ruben Dias, for me, previous season as well, has always been one of my favourite defenders. He's proper an old school defender who is no nonsense, who's the key really been to this Man City defense more than anything. And it had to be a Man City centre back 100%, right? There's no two ways about it. The season they had, incredible season, and it had to be them for sure. And then obviously I had tough ones for more kind of his partner within that kind of space as well. So obviously there's great players that have really, for me, kind of massively performed as well. Martinez, Lisandro Martinez was there for me as well. Varane, again, fantastic. If you look at, Lewis Dunk at Brighton as well, was going to be up there for me. And I think it is a toss-up between perhaps Dunk and perhaps, the likes of Martinez for me, consistency if he wasn't injured. And obviously you've got Manuel Akanji as well for Man City. I did initially have Akanji, but looking at it more kind of closely, I think I'm probably gonna kind of go for Lewis Dunk on this one as the captain of Brighton. He has been a key part of that Brighton team to put them in the position they are at. So we've got Ruben Dias and Lewis Dunk in centre backs, and then left and right. It's an interesting one for me. It's got to be an Arsenal player just because on the left hand side it's Arsenal, great, fantastic season, and a key part of that was obviously Alexander Zinchenko. I think there's no real debate on this, and I think you might agree with me potentially here. From open play alone, from defence, the percentage of open play touches, this is by far one of Arsenal's best players, and having him in the left back position has to 100% for me has to be there. I also think if you look at it from the right back position, there's a lot that could be kind of taken in that space. One of the kind of key areas, obviously, Kyle Walker. Looking at the right back, there's not many players who are faster. You can look at other players, or perhaps you're looking at your more kind of your Arsenals as well, perhaps your Man City. Looking at Newcastle, they've got a fantastic right back as well. And for me, Kieran Trippier has been key as well to the way Newcastle have played. He's created the most chances from set plays. And I think that's really crucial for a right back in that defending, and also from as a set piece taker as well. You've got Kieran Trippier. A lot of England fans listening to this will remember how incredible that free kick was against Croatia, which unfortunately didn't sort of amount to anything later on. But yeah, for me, it's going to be Kieran Trippier, I think, on the right. So my top four centre back, well, it's two centre backs, Ruben Dias, and also we'll have Lewis Dunk. Left back we'll have Zinchenko, and on the right we'll have Kieran Trippier. Thoughts? What are you thinking?
A fairly similar back line to me as well. I think Zinchenko is a good shout. I think the one that I will have to have in there is Ruben Dias. He's just such a consistent defender, and when you're able to be so consistent at such a high level and then competing on a team like Manchester City, I think deservedly would have that spot in the team of the year from the Premier League for me. The only one caveat I would say is from another center back, Manuel Akanji, you mentioned as well. I think it would be between those two for me. Like I said, I'll give it to Diaz, but Akanji has something special because he's able to dribble and carry the ball quite well, but then also has such great passing skills. And that's something that Pep Guardiola requires out of his center backs. So it's cool to see that someone like Akanji being such a good signing for City, but maybe a little bit under the radar overall as a signing, but then performs so well. And I think he just doesn't get enough love in some of the team of the season considerations and some of the podcasts and some of the media that I've seen. But when he has the ball at his feet, he's completed 93.3% of his passes. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And especially for a center back, that's tough. Sure, you're in the back line, so maybe there's some possession that you'll have that's easier just swinging the ball back and forth. But overall, the way that Pep plays, that he forces his center backs to be good on the ball and to play out of the back like that is very impressive. So that is why he would be in that conversation too. But Diaz, his just consistency overall and being one of those more dominant center backs, I would say Diaz is in there for me. You mentioned another one that I have for sure. I don't think there's any debate about Kieran Trippier. He has to be in every single person's team of the season because he was so good coming into Newcastle and, like you said, being the top creator from set pieces this year with 74 chances created. The second person was James Ward-Prowse. Unfortunately, won't be in the Premier League anymore if he stays with Southampton. He created 41. So second place was 41, and then Kieran Trippier was 74. That's a ridiculous gap. So Kieran Trippier, for the attacking prowess that he gave Newcastle, but then also the stellar defense that he helped allow Newcastle to have as the top defense in the league this year. I think he makes that cut for sure. So those are my two so far with Diaz and Trippier. And then continuing on with our back line, I have a shout for a Brighton player. And you mentioned Dunk. I think Dunk is a good inclusion to be in there. But I'm going to throw forward Estupinian. He played very well and very consistent for most of the season, and he's an Ecuadorian international, also like a chance creator. So he's a left back for Brighton. So being able to see him kind of grow into that position as we've realized that Brighton had started to be such a competitor in the league. So I would say Estupinian ends up doing a great job in that position and ends up being one of the reasons that Brighton has been so successful. So that's the three. And then my last one, I'm going to go with another Newcastle player because Newcastle has just been so good and they have the top defense in the league. How can you argue with that? Sven Botman. I think he also flies a bit under the radar, even though, like I keep saying, Newcastle had the best defense in the league, even though everyone thinks that City should ultimately have all these players in the team of the season, which they absolutely should. But Newcastle having such a good defense, he is just so awesome with only 32 goals conceded until they ultimately had 14 clean sheets in that mix too. And he's just such a big part of that. And when he was not in the lineup, he was missed. So I would say Sven Botman rounds up my top four of defenders. So that's Estupinian, left back, my right back, Kieran Trippier, and holding it down in the center, Ruben Diaz and Sven Botman.
Nice. I like the use of the Newcastle players there. Like you said, completely under the radar. A lot of underrated players in that, just because they're not star players like your Ruben Diaz, your Varane, your Rolls Royce Varanes. Sven Botman is still a fantastic pick for that. So I think that's great. I'm gonna switch it up for this one. I'm gonna go for we'll go for like one defensive midfielder and perhaps one attacker, and perhaps we go for the same. So
Okay.
there's a lot of options here for me. I think number one's got to be, without a shadow of a doubt, Rodri. If you look at Champions League, which we haven't spoke about yet, by the way,
True.
we haven't really digested that properly just yet, and I think that's probably because
I don't want to.
that's exactly what I was going to say. It's probably because we no one wants to. But yeah, I think for me, Rodri is easily one of the best defensive midfielders. If you're looking at it from whichever way you look at it, from the title-winning squad in particular, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the fact that passes in the opposition half are 1,475 successful passes in the opposition half, which is fantastic, and also a lot of how City build from the back and obviously from the midfield begins with Rodri as well. So I think he's been crucial to them with their Champions League, but also as a Premier League team as well. I think that's really important. And then from an attacking perspective, I'm going to go for none. It's a difficult one. Actually, yeah, I'm going to give it to someone, because you'll see why in my second pick when I give you my other defensive and attacking pick. It's going to probably be Bruno Fernandes.
Wow.
And yes, there might be a little bias in there. I admit that.
I was going to say, just because you're biased?
I think so, but a lot. If you watch, I mean, it's mainly because I watch pretty much every single Man United game, and the main difference has been Bruno Fernandes. From an attacking perspective, from everything that's been good about Manchester United, when Manchester United playing well, Bruno Fernandes is a key part of that. If you look at where Man United were getting to two finals and getting to third in Premier League, you pull out Bruno Fernandes from that team, you do not get the same. And I think that, for me, therefore warrants him in that team of the season. If you pull out a player from a whole team and you don't think they'll finish in the same way they are, in the same way the position they are, then I think it's only right and only fair for that. So obviously I'm missing a key player out, but you'll see what happens when I go into the next one. But for me, I'm going to go for Rodri, has to be, and also Bruno Fernandes as an attacking midfield. What are you saying?
Good shouts. I follow the sentiment with Rodri. He was just so good and so consistent for Man City as Man City tried to develop that look with Erling Haaland, because remember, this season has been just so long in Erling Haaland. This is only his first season in the Premier League, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit. But Rodri, able to adapt that style of play that Pep continued to massage throughout the season and be so consistent. So he was the chart topper in terms of successful passes by a midfielder. So being able to facilitate the play that allowed City to be so dominant throughout the season, and to be able to also do that while being a solid defensive block inside of that City midfield. So Rodri, I think, probably deservedly takes it for most people in the team of the season. So I would also back that up and agree with you on that one. And then this player that I will now add in, he's certainly a great attacking player, but also can get back and play some defense as well. Martin Odegaard. I was not super high on him. I was able to watch him play like 5 or 6 years ago in the US. Actually, he came over with Real Madrid and they played in the old Crew Stadium here in Ohio. And I saw him, and he was like one of the headlining players because he was still young, and he was on that Real Madrid team, and they brought like him as one of the headliners to be able to play. So we watched him; it was really cool. And after watching his style of play, and he was still young, I was like, maybe he'll be good, but I just don't see him having such a dominant career. But he proved me wrong, and I'm here for it because he was just so stellar this season. It was awesome to see him be able to do things on both sides of the ball, but really he facilitated play so well for Arsenal and was the heartbeat of that midfield, facilitating things back and forth. So Odegaard, for me, and he's only 24, which is just crazy, for me is one of the players that made the difference for Arsenal, that allowed them to almost finish on the top of the table. So Odegaard, I am very impressed by him this season, and I think he makes the difference for Arsenal and will continue to do so as Arsenal tries to strengthen and compete next year. Again, Odegaard makes the slot for me.
It's a great shout, and that was what I was gonna sort of potentially come into for my second kind of attacking midfield. And it was between him and one other player, which we all know who that other player is. You cannot have a Premier League midfield and not have a team of season without him. It has to be Kevin De Bruyne for me. It's the figures talk for themselves, right? If you look at it from, if Rodri was the key from bringing it forward, the passes that in that final third that were played by Kevin De Bruyne, incredible. Created 98 chances this season, which is insane. It's the third most of any player. So if you look at it from that perspective, from that kind of City perspective, it's insane. And I think if you look at what he brings to a Man City team and whether that player can go into pretty much any team in the Premier League, it's him, right? So it has to be Kevin De Bruyne. So for me, Kevin De Bruyne goes in that attacking midfield, and then my final defensive midfielder. And I think it has to be an England player. It has to be a player that, for me, shows the sheer dominance of perhaps England and European football now at the moment. If you're looking at the likes of Grealish, for example, Saka, you're looking at the likes of who else we've got. You've got some incredible like Harry Kane. These are big influences in English football, for example. Declan Rice is getting into that space now. So my choice would definitely be Declan Rice in that space as well. Not just coming from a West Ham team that has also picked up a cup. Let's not forget that West Ham won the Europa Conference Cup, Conference League, which is great to see them win something. My local club for the area I lived in Stratford in East London. So I always used to hear the kind of the cheers and that from my window. So great experience, great atmosphere. So for me, it's great to kind of see. And also you can sort of see Declan Rice in the moment, always consistent in the news with transfer. Is there going to be, there's questions of him kind of agreeing personal terms with Arsenal? Is he potentially Man United in that space as well? Obviously, City are in that space. And that sort of shows how good of a player he has become and how he's essentially crucial to that. He's Mr. West Ham now. He's taken over that mantle. And also he's the captain of West Ham. So I'm going to go with, and because his performance this year has been incredible, I'm going to go with Declan Rice and also, like I said, Kevin De Bruyne. That's my midfield.
So my formation is going to be a little bit different than yours. I'm going to select one more midfielder. So we're going to rock a 4-3-3 so I can take 3 attackers as well. And plus we play a 4-4-3 for Delaware Rising too. So I'm just carrying that over. I have to select Kevin De Bruyne. Like you're talking about the passes in the final third to connect the play from the defensive unit of City all the way through and then to find those final passes is just ridiculous. Like you can just look up highlights of him making just insane passes to just cut through. I'm envisioning one where it was through 5 defenders, takes all of them out of the play with just a simple pass that kind of curls around and then just name who you want to finish it for City, and it'll be done. And then, of course, it always is ending up being Erling Haaland. But it's just immaculate for him. And really, Kevin De Bruyne is just so consistent every year. So he's in the team of the year for sure. Now, since I am the 4-3-3, I'm going to pass it back to you to start us talking about our attackers, and then I'll jump back and then give you my final 3 selection.
For sure, and I think there's only one person here for this for one of my 2 strikers I'm choosing. It's got to be the incredible Erling Haaland. There is no 2 ways about it from a striker perspective. He is I would argue, every Premier League's striker of the dreams. He's a player that you can put onto a plate and would definitely score. And I think from a season perspective, I think there's probably no argument about it personally. I think there is no better for this. I'm just looking at some of these stats here. I'm going to run you through some of these records here and it'll blow your mind. He's now got a record for the most goals scored in a player's first 5 games, right? He's 36 goals this season are the most by a player in a season in Premier League history. So it's just the amount of, like, hat tricks. He scores hat tricks against Man United. Unfortunately, he scored scored hat tricks against consecutive games in August against Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest, and he's been the youngest player to achieve this in the Premier League at 22. Yeah, fantastic stuff.
Yeah, he's not even a human.
And the second player will be Marcus Rashford for me. I think. It could have been Harry Kane, could have been obvious different players. But for me, I'm going to go for Marcus Rashford. For me, consistency-wise, his form has been scintillating from the beginning as well. So, and again, if you remove him from this Manchester United team, you remove his goals from this Manchester United team, and you remove his influence this season Manchester United team, in my opinion, there's no one better. So I'm going to go for Erling Haaland and also Marcus Rashford. Throw it back to you for what you're thinking.
Okay, I like the Rashford shout. He does not make my list, unfortunately, but you're right. If you take him out of Manchester United's team, they're not going to finish in the top 4. So a good call with that. I'll just get the easy one out of the way. Erling Haaland, of course, absolutely. Just a ridiculous season. You mentioned the stupid stats that he has been garnishing this season in his first ever Premier League season, which is just still ridiculous to think about. His 36 goals are the most by a player in a season in Premier League history, and the most in a top flight since Ron Davies scored 37 in the 1966-67 season. Plus, he had 8 assists as well on top of all of his goals, and that equals 44 goal involvements, and that equals Thierry Henry's total in 2002-2003. So quite good company for Mr. Haaland. Again, he's not a human. He's just a robot because he's so good. It's just ridiculous. So everybody's team of the season surely has Erling Haaland. I would love to have a conversation with someone that doesn't include him because that would just be ridiculous.
And just 22 years old, by the way. Just 22 years old.
We love to hear that as Manchester United fans because he's going to be causing us problems for the rest. Now, I'm doing a 4-3-3, so I have 2 more attackers to toss into the conversation. For this selection, I was thinking of Salah. He had a fairly solid season, very consistent, again, scoring a lot of goals, making an impact for Liverpool. But I think there was an even bigger impact had by Saka. Saka is just so good this year, really helped take Arsenal to that next level. It's been cool to see him fit into this Arsenal team and be one of the attacking threats that allowed Arsenal to really make that push to be at the top of the league. He's only 21 years old as well. That is also very frightening because he's going to be a very good player for Arsenal and for England for years to come. And he was just so consistent, not even only as a goal scorer with 13 goals, but then also added 11 assists. So that is 24 goal involvements and really made such an impact for Arsenal. He makes my team of the season, as well as my boy. I had him on the fantasy team from the very start, Harry Kane, making such an important and consistent contribution to keep Spurs where they were in the league, because they could have fallen a lot further. But just because he is such a consistent goal scorer and really such a poacher, that he ended up keeping Tottenham from having a really dangerously bad season, like a Chelsea, for example. He had 28 goals, and I was there for all of them, having him on my fantasy team. Much appreciated, Mr. Kane. I appreciate that. So thank you for all the goals that you do consistently score. we'll see what happens next year if he is still in a Spurs uniform or not. That will be the interesting question. But he makes my final slot of my 4-3-3 for the team of the season. What are your thoughts overall on both of our teams?
And it's great. We see there's definitely similarities in there. We've looked at the figures, looked at the facts, we looked at players, consistency, players' performances across the board. We've also got a bit of like personal bias in there. Maybe it's just me within that as well. We've got a great sort of experience, a mixture of experience, a mixture of ages, variety as well, and also a variety of teams in there as well. We could have gone basically built this out from a City team because how good they've been this season, and it might have been a split between Arsenal and City. Technically, the team could have been easily. So there's definitely players in there that perhaps have been underrated, perhaps that the players other people may not have gone for. So great to kind of see, and it's fantastic for us to kind of do it. I'll be excited to see when we do look back at, like I said, when we do look forward to perhaps next season, maybe perhaps we can do a bit of a look at potential players to look out for. That'll be some risk to look at in another podcast as well. So, and that brings me nicely into thinking about the season. You mentioned our team of the season, but I just wanted to get your one player of the season. Like, who is your, let's use a bit of the American. Who's your MVP of the Premier League 2022-2023 season?
I mean, it's hard to argue for anybody other than Erling Haaland. But the records that he breaks, the goals that he scores, the impact that he makes for City, I don't think that City ends up being the top of the league without Erling Haaland and him eventually fitting in to this squad. So for me, and for probably most people, it just has to be Erling Haaland, the player of the season. He's been so good. The goals he scores are just ridiculous. And again, I will keep saying this. I don't think he is a human. He's just some type of cyborg. And when he goes to a restaurant, he just orders what that guy's having because he doesn't know American food. So or just food in general. And he has to order something that he sees over there because he's literally a robot that doesn't eat food. He's just so good and it's ridiculous. So I say he is my number one. I'm going to toss in an honorable mention though. I will say John Stones. Now, hear me out.
Okay.
There's a special reason why. So John Stones, besides just looking wonderful, he's a very good looking man. He was asked to do so much this season for City, not only as a center back, also playing out as a wing back / a left or right back occasionally. He also then became a defensive midfielder later on in the season and played fairly well, especially for being a center back for most of your career. And then they asked him to move to be a winger. So he's played as a winger too, and wasn't bad. So being able to do all of those different positions for City and being that player that can be so versatile in a Pep system, which is also very difficult to do, I think that he deserves some praise for doing that. So shout out to John Stones for just being an awesomely good soccer player and good looking dude.
I love that. I think it's a really good shout. I remember even in the actual Champions League final, he's in that position, that defensive midfield position. So I think it's incredible. I would agree with you. I think I'm exactly the same. I think Erling Haaland has to be the player of the season for both of us, but also two players we'll put in for honourable mentions. Kevin De Bruyne. He's Mr. Consistent. There is, no, like I said before, no team that would not want Kevin De Bruyne, most consistent player, and is at the heart of pretty much everything City do. So I think we have to put him in there. And the other one I'll do like an honourable mention. I mean, again, maybe a bias, but Casemiro has been one of Man United's best players. If you look at some of the games, you look at some of the performances he's put in, and the plaudits he's been getting, not just from Man United fans, has been insane. Him and has been sort of comparisons with like Thomas Partey, for example, of Arsenal, and Granit Xhaka, and in that space, and people are like, how is he in a conversation? But what he's done as well, if you look at it, from coming from Real Madrid with that winning mentality to where he is now, I think, he's also done it all, I would argue, coming from Real Madrid and just literally taken like to a duck to water here at Manchester United, and incredible. So that's what I would say as my player of this. Well, Haaland's my player of the season, but one of my honorable mentions as well.
Yeah, that's a good shout too. And it is cool to see players that are so impactful for their teams that if you think about removing them, that it just wouldn't be the same team. So yeah, I would agree. Casemiro really does make an impact like that too, especially being such a big follower of Manchester United. Now let's remove ourselves from the field, take a step just onto the sideline. And who are we picking as our manager of the season? What's your shout for this one?
I'm going to go straight in on this one. Hey, there's an obvious one that potentially maybe like, for example, Pep Guardiola could be an option. He's done it all, the treble winning, yada yada. Pep Guardiola is amazing. We could dedicate one whole episode to Pep Guardiola and break down each thing that he's done and how amazing he's done off the pitch in terms of speaking to his players, development. Yes, he's amazing. But let's remove that again for 1 second and not look at Brighton as a team and think about who has put themselves in that position. If you look at Graham Potter, that was in that position originally, they weren't doing too badly. Potter, we know what happens at Chelsea, but then you leave a club which is now in a position which is not doing too poorly. Then you bring in a manager, De Zerbi, who has been a sensation with his brand of football, what he's how the way Brighton have finished the league and where they finished, getting their European football, what he's done from a perspective of bringing in certain players that have just been playing like the fluidity of their game has been insane, but also not thinking about the fact that Graham Potter's he has almost completely put a complete brand new mark on this Brighton team, and it's been sensational for them. And I think for me, I would put in for what he's done for the Premier League this season and what he's done for Brighton as a whole. My manager season's got to be De Zerbi. I think it's been insane. So yeah, that's what I'm going to run with. What are you thinking? What's yours?
My selection is Pep. When you win a treble in one season, on top of bringing in one of the most exciting, young, talented players that could ultimately be the GOAT at some point, and then injecting him into your already stellar squad, that is so difficult to do. Winning a treble and then taking that player and merging him into your team, doing that in the same season, I think is ridiculous. And then also being able to fight off a wonderful Arsenal team that just fell short at the finish line. I think Pep deserves it this season from all of those things combined. His coaching style is wonderful. I think now people are saying he's the greatest manager of all time. I would still have questions about that. Maybe that's a conversation we can have another day, but I will give it to Pep because all of those difficult tasks that he had to do this season to be able to accomplish them all and then make it where he gets 3 fancy trophies in the end. I would say he is my selection for sure. I would say if Graham Potter stayed at Brighton, I think I would have given it to Graham Potter. And if they ended up where they ended up, because his system, the way that he managed that team, I think was wonderful. It is just a crapshoot at Chelsea. So I don't really give much credit to him not working out there because it is just a terrible place to be for anyone at the moment. Hopefully they can get that sorted out. But the system, again, that he implemented at Brighton, and it was fairly carried over to De Zerbi as well. So De Zerbi absolutely should be in that conversation because he was able to pick it up, implement his own things too. But the system that Potter created there, I think, was wonderful. So between De Zerbi and Potter, I think that's a good honorable mention shout. We can just like merge them into one person and give them an honorable mention ribbon.
Yeah, I mean, you're bang on. It was going to be Pep, right? I think any player, any person would say Pep. And now as we end off this wonderful season, and we remove ourselves even further from the pitch, from the sidelines, to looking at it as across the whole season, I think we should close this episode with not our nutmegged of the week or how we nutmeg of the episode. We're going to look at it as your nutmegged of the whole season. So looking back at what we've done at the previous season, what has been your nutmegged of the season as we close out this episode?
There were many to select from. There was quite a lot of just stupid, dumb, funny things happening this season, which I'm always here for because that makes it much more exciting. For me, the specific nutmeg of the season, I use it as a bookend as well to kind of think of the timeline of the season because it's been so extended. Is for me the Conte and Tuchel weird handshake interaction, which did happen this year. It's crazy to think about. And the nutmeg of it is one, it's funny, it's weird. So they do a handshake type of thing, but then Tuchel is like, no, come back here, Conte. And then Conte's like, fam, I'm not coming back. You can't talk to me like that. And the reason I think behind it all is what I've heard some people talk about is when they shook hands, Conte didn't look Tuchel in the eyes. And Tuchel was like angry about that. So he's like, come back here, look me in the eyes when you shake my hand. I think that's hilarious, first off. But then the actual nutmeg is neither of them are managers of those clubs anymore. I think it's hilarious. The two big name managers ending up not doing too hot for their respective clubs. So they end up getting the boot, but giving us a good show along the way.
Great shout. And I think that is, I was thinking back at that as well and thinking how that particular moment, how funny just their whole interactions is fantastic. And here's my nutmeg of the season. And I'm bringing back one of the special ones that we previously put in. And I still think to this day, it still makes
Of
me
course.
laugh. And it still it goes down forever as the whole kind of that amazing game between Spurs and
Thank goodness.
Liverpool, Anfield, and incredible goal by Richarlison. It's incredible. He's taking his top off, crazy experience. You can feel the roof lift off from the sort of Spurs side at Anfield. And then that goal gets immediately cancelled out. And I think that will forever live with me just because of his sheer reaction. He's shushing the fans. He's tops off. He's down on his knees. He's thought he's won the game, and then it gets cancelled out. So for me, that is my nutmeg of the season. It doesn't get any better than that. No VAR will ever rule that out. No sort of issue with that. I think that for me will live with me as my nutmeg of the season.
You know what will live with me? His back tattoo and that face of Neymar that doesn't even look like Neymar. Wonderful stuff. Good shout.
So that's what my sort of nutmeg of the season would be, pulling down the curtain on another cracking season, which saw City coming out with 3 trophies, with Dortmund losing by 2 points, by the likes of Barcelona came back to the same levels they are now, and in terms of winning the league, I'm excited for next season. How are you feeling?
I'm super excited for next season. It was a long season because of the World Cup, so that gave us a lot more time to like experience different things in a different way, which made it fun. But I'm looking forward to like more of a regular Premier League season where there's a lot of drama compacted a little bit more. I'm looking forward to it, and there's so many big signings already talking about being happening from managers to players. So that is going to make for a very exciting Premier League season, and that means we're going to actually make predictions in the next episode of what we think the Premier League will shake out to be. So make sure you follow along on that one. And with that phase, do you want to offer us any parting wisdom now that you're a married man?
More wisdom from me? No, I mean, all I would say is, this has been an incredible season for lots of highs, lots of lows. But I am excited, as I'm excited to walk into married life. Now I am a married man. So, yeah, thanks for all our listeners so far, up to date so far. Looking forward to dissecting the next season with you as well. Looking forward to talking through what our predictions are going to be for the next season. Also, looking forward to it. It's always been as a pleasure. Cheers, Andrew, for joining me again.
Yep, appreciate it. And last note, too, cheers to Fee for calling Southampton being in last place in the league. Good for her. All right,
Nice.
well, appreciate it. Good, sir. Sign us off. I'll see you in the next one.
See you later. Take care, bud.